So I, like most people, was under the impression that after United completed the signing of Rasmus Højlund, there was likely only going to be one other signing, and I assumed that would be Sofyan Amrabat. However, in the last few days, with West Ham agreeing the fee for Maguire with Manchester United, which is around £30 million, and Scott McTominay looking likely to leave for around £35 to maybe £40 million, as well as Fred potentially recouping around £15 million, Donny van de Beek around £20 million, and Dean Henderson around £20 million as well, United in theory should have around £110 to £125 million to reinvest in the squad, and that's not including the departures of Anthony Elanga, Alex Telles, and players like Brandon Williams, Pellistri and Hannibal Mejbri, who could all potentially leave as well. But how should United go about reinvesting this money towards the end of this transfer window? But before I go any further, are you looking to dramatically improve your fantasy football points score from last season? Well, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Fantasy Football Fix, which is the perfect tool for anyone who wants to get the best possible start to this FPL season, as they provide an Elite 11 team reveal which allows you to track fantasy football's greatest ever managers in real time, with over 82 top 10,000 and 61 top 5,000 finishes. And just in my opinion, if you're not using this and someone else is, you're at a massive disadvantage. But not just that, Fantasy Football Fix also allows you to see the pre-deadline captain ownership data. The assistant manager tool also allows you to unlock transfer optimization, and you can also get predicted prices data to potentially get an advantage in the long run by increasing your team's overall value. And alongside this, they also have stats from Opta, they have predicted player points and much more. And I personally will definitely be using Fantasy Football Fix, and I'll be setting up my own fantasy football league, so I'll put the code somewhere either on the screen or in the description. So not only can you join my league, but you can also use Fantasy Football Fix to try to beat me as well. And so I'll leave it linked in the description for you to go to after this video. Well, I think Sofyan Amrabat has to be the priority. He seems like the perfect backup to Casemiro, capable of coming in and actually being a starter for most of the season as well, as he's really that good, and so United would have two fantastic defensive midfield options, both of whom can play in that deep single pivot position. And for £30 to £35 million for a 26-year-old Amrabat, combined with the fact that Scott McTominay is probably going to be sold for around that mark if not more, and this just seems like a no-brainer deal for United to do. But after Amrabat is brought in, United have pretty much dealt with all the main problem issues in the squad, and now they can go about refining certain positions and improving the overall squad depth. And I would start at the centre-back position with Benjamin Pavard. And it is reported that Bayern Munich are asking for around £26 million because he's only got 1 year left on his contract. Now Pavard is 27 years old and has a versatility to play either centre back or right back to an elite level, and his versatility can be seen as for Bayern Munich he's played at centre back, played as a right sided centre back in a back three, as well as playing as an orthodox right back for both Bayern Munich and France. Whilst if signed, I would see Pavard being used both as a right back and a centre back. I do think his long term position under Ten Hag would be at centre back alongside Lisandro Martinez, essentially as a long term Rafael Varane replacement. And whilst at the moment I do think Rafael Varane is a better defender, Pavard still has all the defensive attributes that Ten Hag would want, being relatively quick and capable of playing in a high back line, as well as having the aerial ability that someone like Yuri Timber probably doesn't have. But in possession, Pavard would dramatically improve United whether he came in at right back or centre back. At centre back he'd definitely be a better ball playing option than Varane, being a better progressive passer and also just being more comfortable in congested areas under pressure. But the beauty of signing Pavard is that you would essentially get a right back as well. Whilst I do think Diogo Dalot will be Ten Hag's long-term right back and does have elite level potential, he does still have a few deficiencies in his game and isn't quite at that level. And I think Pavard does have better defensive ability and will come in and improve United in that area, as well as probably also being a better long passer and a better progressive passer than Dalot as well. And whilst Wan-Bissaka I would say is the better one-on-one defender when compared to Pavard, I do think Pavard is still a very good 1v1 defender. But he has that in-possession ability that Wan-Bissaka just doesn't have, and so by deploying Pavard at right back, you're kind of getting a blend of Dalot and Wan-Bissaka's best attributes without their weaknesses. Considering Pavard's still just 27, so not even in his peak years yet, which also happens to be 3 years younger than Harry Maguire, he's a better player than Maguire, has more versatility, is also going to be around £4 or £5 million cheaper, as well as probably having a lower salary as well, as he currently earns around €100,000 a week at Bayern Munich, which means he's probably coming into United at around £6 or £7 million per year, around £3 or £4 million a year less than Harry Maguire's salary. And so factoring all of that in, like the McTominay and Amrabat deals, bringing in Pavard seems like the perfect deal for Ten Hag's United. And that would still only be around £60 million of the £110 to £125 million that United could recoup from player sales at the end of this transfer window. So what should they do with the rest? Well, the two positions they would need to improve would be a ball-winning central midfielder to essentially replace Fred. Someone who could probably play as a deep single pivot but also play alongside either Casemiro or Amrabat, pushing high up the pitch and being a pressing weapon in certain games. The other position that you would probably say United need to improve is a second choice striker to take the pressure off Højlund, because we know that Anthony Martial is very injury prone and can't be relied upon for the whole season. Now, you may look to Mason Greenwood and say he can potentially play there, as can Marcus Rashford, but with Greenwood's future, as well as his returning form if he does return being unclear, Ten Hag may feel that going into the season with Martial and potentially Rashford as the only two alternatives to Højlund may leave them quite thin, particularly during the latter stages of the group stages of the Champions League, which comes around November-December. But the fact that Jadon Sancho has been used as a false 9, Greenwood is still in and around the squad and does look set to return, and Marcus Rashford can also play up front for a certain period of time, does lead me to think that maybe a Fred upgrade would be the better way of spending the rest of the money. And even if the centre forward options aren't substantial enough, United can go back into the market in January. And one player who I think could be the perfect Fred replacement and has been linked with United over the last few days is Everton's Amadou Onana. Now, Onana is still just 21 years old, but he's already got a solid Premier League campaign under his belt, as he was very impressive for Everton last season, particularly in big games, with his performance against Arsenal being a standout. I will do a separate video analysing Onana. If it is out, I will leave it linked in the description. But in short, like Fred, I don't think he's a perfect central midfielder for Ten Hag. He does have a few deficiencies in his game that he does need to improve, particularly his progressive passing, his overall passing range, as well as the volume of progressive carries he's able to complete throughout a match. But he's one of those players who the stats don't really do justice, as in possession he does have the press resistance to receive a ball and turn out of pressure almost without even touching the ball, and then from there he has the physical strength along with the athleticism to drive into space, carrying the ball up the pitch at pace, which would definitely aid United's quick transition in attack, particularly in big games where they're looking to move the ball forward quickly, get into the likes of Fernandes and Mason Mount, who can then look to thread through balls for the likes of Garnacho and Rashford and Højlund running in behind. And just imagine in big games against the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool, you could play with Casemiro as a single pivot, and rather than having Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes playing as a 3/8 ahead of Casemiro, you could move one of Fernandes or Mount out to the right side and play Onana ahead of Casemiro alongside the other one. I think in big games I would like to see the setup of Casemiro as a single pivot, with Onana and Mason Mount playing as the 8s ahead and Bruno Fernandes off onto the right side, as what this would mean during pressing situations is that you have two players in advanced positions behind the centre forward who have the tenacity, the defensive ability, the reading of the game, the energy and the athleticism to be significant pressing weapons. And you can imagine if you were playing Manchester City, for example, with Rice and Kovacic essentially playing as a double pivot, that having Onana and Mason Mount push onto them during the press dramatically improves United's ability to win the ball high up the pitch compared to what they had last season with Bruno Fernandes or Eriksen alongside Fred. Considering Everton paid £33 million for Onana last summer, he's probably going to cost United around the £50 million mark. But whilst it is expensive, considering United are moving on Scott McTominay, Van der Beek and Fred, I think that Onana comes in and adds something that United don't currently have in the squad, and that is tremendous ball winning ability, which if you watch my analysis video of Onana, which should be out soon, if it is I'll leave it linked in the description, if not subscribe to the channel, then you'll see that from a defensive point of view he is a statistical monster. And so I think having him in the squad would give Ten Hag a unique tactical weapon during certain big games, which I think over the course of the whole season may be more valuable than a third choice striker. And so the three players that I think United should bring in with the money they raised from sales are Pavard for around £26 million, Sofian Amrabat for around 35, and Onana for around 50.